Welcome back to Poser Destroyer. I've got a bunch of sick releases from this year, 2025, that I'm going to give you some quick reviews of, and hopefully there'll be some that you should check out that maybe you haven't already listened to. So let's start with the new Drawn and Quartered, Lord of Two Horns. If you aren't familiar with Drawn and Quartered, this lineup of phenomenal musicians from Seattle, Washington has been putting out gem after extreme metal gem since 1992 under the monikers both Plaguebearer and Drawn and Quartered. This is the 9th full-length from the band under the Drawn and Quartered name, and what completely blows me away is how angry it is. This is a ferocious album, and despite the band being 30 years into doing this, they still sound as hungry as a band of youthful kids. This isn't a band that is content just resting on their laurels. A few new albums hit me like a sledgehammer like this one has, and I adore Drawn and Quartered for it. Not only are they as good as ever, but they're still putting out stuff that shows that they're still relevant and deserve their permanent home in death metal's canon. The great cover art is by their long-term collaborator Gabriel Byrne, who has been creating covers for them since the late 90s. Greek label Nuclear Winter Records put this one out, which is the label owned by Anastasis from Dead Congregation. Putridity, Morbid Ataraxia. This 4th full-length from Italian brutal death metal juggernauts Putridity is among their best offerings. The members are all stellar musicians from the likes of Blasphemer, Molested Divinity, Indecent Excision, and Disgustibus, among others. And the 8th track on here includes guest vocals by Miko of Torso. This is an intense, fast, relentless, tight, and technical album that fans of this style are sure to adore. All the transitions are immediate, so the album never loses momentum, but death metal fans looking for something dynamic instead of bludgeoning might have a little more trouble with this one. This also includes the infamous audio clip that Skinless also used from the 1972 John Waters film Pink Flamingos that was said by drag queen Divine about condoning first-degree murder and advocating cannibalism. They even capped the album with a cover of Enmity's Rotted Divinity. The cover is by Master Paolo Girardi, so grab this from Willowtip Records. Unmerciful, Devouring Darkness. The 4th full-length by Kansas-based intense brutal death metal band Unmerciful is a ferocious example of polished, modern, brutal death that works. Whereas a classic 2006 debut was a raw, modern, brutal death metal classic that reminded me a bit of Gorgasm's Masticate to Dominate, their new album reminds me more of Origin's Echoes of Decimation. This makes sense as the lineup still has 2 members of Origin in the lineup, and this album could be mistaken for a very good Origin album if not for the different vocal approach. I also want to point out the maliciously evil and addictive riff that it repeats in the song Malice Unbound. It's ridiculous, and I just find myself keep returning to it. I really enjoy that riff. It's addictive. I struggle a bit with this type of production as I prefer things a little more raw and dirty, but this one has grown on me quite a bit, so especially if you're not really feeling the new Origin stuff, maybe check out this stuff, the new Unmerciful instead. So grab this from Willowtip Records. Datura, My Kingdom is Not of This World. This Deeds of Flesh-worshipping band from Ukraine has been around since 1999, and they're one of the most underrated brutal death metal bands around. This latest full-length is another solid addition to their discography. Datura are tight and technical, but this one has a lot of pinch harmonics thrown in there too that remind me a lot of Malignancy. The production could be a little thicker and punchier, especially compared to some of the earlier releases, but there's definitely some brutal stuff here. It includes some okay covers of Suffocation's Thrones of Blood and Slayer's Raining Blood. So I guess we kind of have a blood theme there with the covers. But the Suffocation cover irks me a bit, though, since some of the vocals are a little off time from Frank Mullen's delivery, and Frank's performance is basically sacred to me. But other than that, it's a mostly good cover. The Slayer cover is fun, but feels a little too obvious, you know, picking Slayer's most popular song. But this is a pretty strong release, but the covers don't really add too much. You can take or leave the covers. So grab this from Coyote Records. Deliquesce, Savior, Enslaver. Deliquesce are one of the best newer death metal bands out of Australia. They formed in 2019 and then dropped an incredible EP in 2020, which was followed by full-length albums in 2023 and then this year. Bands like Suffocation, Defeated Sanity, and Malignancy often get mentioned as a comparison due to Deliquesce's mixture of technicality and brutality, but I think they've increasingly come into their own sound, especially on this album. Their first EP and their first full-length sound a lot more like brutal kind of Suffocation worship, whereas this one begins to feel a little more technical, a little more adventurous, maybe a little less on that brutal side, so it requires a little more time to get into instead of just relying on nostalgia like you could with the earlier releases. They also distinguish themselves by their use of multiple vocal approaches, which vary from traditional gutturals to a more kind of hardcore Mike DeSalvo-esque shouted guttural. Their latest album is out now via BTK Recordings on Jewel Case CD or Lacerated Enemy Records on Digipack CD, and Iron Fortress Records put it out on tape. As an extra little tidbit, the guitarist in Deliquesce is also the bassist in Disentomb and is the phenomenal musician behind the death grind band Lurid Panacea. If I'm pronouncing those things correctly, hard to say. Next is Compulsed Amalgamated Anguish. Compulsed are a newer band that features members of Waking the Cadaver and Bludgeoned, but this is a far more brutal endeavor than the breakdown-centric Waking the Cadaver. I also greatly prefer the low guttural vocal style here. This is amazing stuff, and some songs experiment a little bit with death grind and also dissonant black metal. So I hope they continue to experiment in the future, because that really helps kind of differentiate this from other stuff. The production crushes and works perfectly for this style of brutality thanks to AJ Viana of Cognitive and Half handling the mixing and mastering. The logo here is by Nev of Gruesome Graphics. This is a fantastic debut that I recommend checking out if you want something brutal but need something with a little bit of seasoning, so you can grab that from P2. Next up we have Creeping Fear, Realm of the Impaled. Got a whole realm for those guys now. So Creeping Fear never disappoints, so I'm thrilled to say that the third full-length from France's Creeping Fear similarly devastates. I was hooked within a few moments of the first off-time groove hitting in that very first song. This album is so heavy and addictively groovy. It has everything I look for in death metal. The drums are punchy, the guitar tone is thicker than a bowl of oatmeal, and the album is ripe with tempo changes and great transitions. It features another gorgeous cover by Paolo Girardi with another version of the demon that was depicted on their 2021 cover, Hate God Triumph. Dan Suano mastered the album, so of course it sounds great. If you want death metal that is memorable, chuggy, digestible, and just genuinely great, check this one out. French label Delarim Records put this out. Unbirth, a sodomist besmirchment. So this is the first new Unbirth material since the passing of drummer Mirko Vertis in 2020 following a car accident. Despite the difficulties of carrying on, Unbirth's Italian take on technical brutal death, it's a memorable comeback, and it's just as strong as their previous two full lengths. The big attraction here is the guitar riffing style. It's winding, it's high energy, it's unorthodox, and so it often feels then also epic in scope, but it's also groovy and accessible. So it's just a great album, and so you can grab this from New Standard Elite if you're just looking for some good modern brutal death. Speaking of good modern, but taking it back a little bit in terms of what it sounds like, check out also Shivering's demo from this year. The first demo by Greek band Shivering immediately reminds of fellow Greek brutal death metal titans Inveracity, and that's because the band share a guitarist with Inveracity. So this is an absolutely marvelous demo, and if you're a fan of Inveracity and Suffocation, then you definitely need to check this out. My only minor complaint is the excessive layering on the vocals, maybe some reverb in there too, but if they strip down the vocals more to make them a little more raw, then this would be perfection. So I really hope they do that with the first full length, show more confidence in the vocal approach, strip it down, keep it raw, like the rest of the music, and then that is just going to be an amazing album. But in the meantime, yeah, this demo really good. New Standard Elite just put this out, and I can't wait for more from this band. This is definitely one of the top demos of the year. Kakothanasy, Mechanism. So Kakothanasy are probably the only technical brutal death metal band that I'd list as playing at the same level as Defeated Sanity, and in some cases they maybe even surpass Lily & Co. This is the second full-length from Kakothanasy, which is available through Japanese label Amputated Vein. The song names might be long, but the songs themselves are punchy, creative, and technical. I so far don't think it tops 2019's Distomorph in terms of songwriting, as this one feels more focused on kind of playing around with weird time signatures, stop-start breakdowns, so maybe it doesn't flow as well. It's still very interesting, but it feels more disjointed. That opinion might change as I continue to absorb the album, as something this technical really needs repeated listens to really get a good feeling for the songwriting, just like was the case with the final Spawn of Possession release. And so this is one of the most exciting bands out there that really pushed the envelope. So after a 6-year wait, I'm thrilled that this album is finally out there. So I really hope you don't sleep on this one. So Cryptic Revelation, Trust No One. Japan's Cryptic Revelation formed as Death Torsion in 1991 and changed their name to Cryptic Revelation in 1998. In 1999, they released a phenomenal alien conspiracy theory EP called The Truth Is Out There, which I consider a cult classic of Japanese brutal death. Outside of some demos that didn't get a proper release, they've largely been dormant for the 26 years that followed that EP up until right now. So it only took them 34 years, but they finally released a full-length album. And so is this comeback any good? Absolutely. Despite the generic album artwork and less charming new logo, there is some fantastic music here. The thin production initially turned me off, but give this album a fair shake. Make sure you get past that first track. There are some incredible, memorable riffs here and some strong songwriting. There are crushing brutal parts, some of the best and most original I've heard in a while, but also the rare, beautiful melody that reminds me of fellow Japanese death metalers' intestine ballism. They also use a lot more stop-starts than they used to, and I always love stop-starts in songwriting. This is an album that is a grower, but the more time you spend with it, the more you realize that Cryptic Revelation are still something very special. Their own Death Torsion label released this, and hopefully they'll continue to be an active band because death metal is a stronger genre with them in it. So if you check out this album, make sure you really give it a few spins, let it sink in a little bit before you move on to whatever is next on your listening queue. Impureza, Alcazares. Ever since I heard Dave Suzuki's neoclassical solo on Vital Remains' I Am God, I've adored any time that bands have utilized classical and Spanish-style guitar playing in death metal. Impureza from France are one of my favorite death metal bands for their unique mix of technical death metal with Spanish guitar and flamenco. This makes them one of the most unique bands I've ever heard, and all of this is elevated further due to the phenomenal drumming and the beautiful fretless bass playing. This is Impureza's third full-length, and it shows their strengths as songwriters and as a band with their own unique sound. The push-pull between death metal's ferocity and flamenco's fun, beautiful danceability makes for an addictive listen. My only complaint is that Season of Mist released it in one of these terrible, thin, flimsy digipacks that they put everything out in nowadays. I don't know why they do this. I can't stand these digipacks. I can only hope this might get like a Brazilian jewel case edition or something like that. So if you're somebody that is always listening to Nile put out the same album over and over, I would really say that you should start checking out Impureza. There's maybe some overlap in terms of what you're looking for there, but this is a much more original band doing something really fresh. I really think they deserve to have more ears listening to them. Bludgeoned by Deformity, Epoch of Immorality. Bludgeoned by Deformity is a new band that mixes brutal death metal with, we've got this dirty word, hardcore. The band immediately have some notoriety because their lineup includes Adam Jarvis from Pig Destroyer and Misery Index on drums, and Devon from Sengus Ugabog and Limb Splitter on vocals. The mix has the drums at the forefront with a lot of polish and triggers, so it's kind of sterile. The guitars get buried whenever there's a lot of fast drumming. The vocals have a lot of reverb, and so they sound a little disconnected from the music. It's an angry and breakdown-heavy album. Devin has a good amount of variety in his vocal approach here and has some great vocal patterns. I think the mix, though, is a deterrent for me from liking this more, especially with the goofy, overly triggered drums being so loud. But if you're looking for something aggressive from some notable musicians, you can grab this from Iron Fortress. But yeah, I just wish the mix was different. Whenever a band mixes drums like this, I just have to ask, like, is this really the most important part of your music? Are the drums so important that they should bury everything else in the mix? I would say no. If the guitars were at the forefront, this would probably be a much stronger album, in my opinion. Benediction, Ravage of Empires. So after 36 years of activity, English death metal legends Benediction are back with their 9th full-length album, and although nothing may top their early classic albums, they've still got some gas left in the gas tank and sound especially inspired here. It's still what you'd come to expect from a classic old-school death metal band, so there's nothing you haven't really heard before on here, and that's its biggest fault. Dave Ingram is still a powerful vocalist that enunciates well, but none of the riffing does much that hasn't been done before. It's a very familiar listen that stands well in isolation, but in the context of death metal's history, there are simply many albums that have done this, but better, especially when we're hearing all these familiar riffs. So if you're just itching for more nostalgic Benediction music, or just some comfortable, mid-paced, groovy death metal, this might be an okay way to satisfy, so you can grab this from Nuclear Blast, but if you're looking for something fresh, something challenging and original, this might not be one that you want to pick up. Gored Embrace, In the Presence of a Malevolent Soul. Chicago's Gored Embrace are alumni from my own label, Sewer Rot Records, and they have followed their 2021 demo up with this debut full-length through Iron Fortress Records. It has plenty of tough guy grooves and some great solos, solid well-enunciated guttural vocals, and strong transitions. This is some great mid-paced death with addictive energy that is easy to nod your head along to. The breakdowns cater a little more to the younger crowd than the old guard, but it's good fun if you're down for it. The sound is pretty good too, as it was mixed by Andy Nelson from Weekend Nachos, and it was mastered by Brad Boatwright, who also mastered albums by Obituary, Skeleton Witch, Sothelus, Gatecreeper, and countless others. It also has a sample from Always Sunny in Philadelphia too, because why not? There's a classy instrumental towards the end, and the artwork by Dom Pabon from Final Resting Place does a great job at nodding to the late, great H.R. Geiger. And our last one for today, Reburied, Flesh Mourning. This is another one from Iron Fortress, following their 2023 face-melting debut. See what I did there? Reburied from Seattle have now released their sophomore album. If you like mid-paced, gross, old-school revivalist bands that worship incantation, then this is a really good example of that style done decently well. The songwriting is pretty good, it's pretty groovy, and the production works well for this style. It's a really solid effort. My only complaint is that we don't need any more incantation worship albums. We've got enough. We've met the quota. We don't need any more of those. Let's worship some other old school bands that haven't really gotten enough attention, or at least not in terms of being replicated. But if you are a total nerd for incantation worship albums and just can't get enough of that sound, then check this out. So that's it for this batch of reviews. Do you share my thoughts on them? If not, you can let me know in the comments. Are there other albums you want to hear my thoughts on? Let me know. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you haven't, and you can check out other Poser Destroyers here too if you haven't yet done so. So until next time, keep it brutal.